ladies and gentlemen in the room. You're welcome to this program. My name is Shehu Zubairu, and I have industry leaders and business champions in the room to have this very important discussion around the reason why strategy fails. And you are all welcome to the room. Please, I'd like us to grab our pens and our notepads, because there's a lot of information that will be shared in this very short webinar session. So you're welcome to the program. Now, I will just share my screen very quickly so you can see what we have in store for you. We'll run through that. Please, can someone confirm that you can see my screen? Can you see my screen, ladies and gentlemen?
Yes, please.
All right, thank you very much. We have about 49 people in the room, and so far I see the number growing as we progress. Now, why strategy fail? How HR and business leaders can ensure success is what we are going to be discussing today. And this is the journey we'll have. We'll just quickly run through this, and then the panelists, I will introduce the panelists. Have a poll very quickly, and then we'll go through the first round of questions. Then we'll discuss our poll questions, and then the second round of questions. Then we take questions from the audience, and then we will close. So that's a very, very short time. Hopefully within the next 1 hour, max 1 hour, 15 minutes, we should be done so we can get back to work. Who are our panelists today? And these are the faces that we'll be discussing very, very quickly. The first person I would like to talk about is Innocent Osege. He is the managing partner for Human Capital Partners. He has over 3 decades of experience. He has an MBA, a level A and level B psychometrics practitioner, and is a fellow of the CIPM, a fellow of Institute of Management Consultant, and is also a chartered management consultant as well. He is also certified or accredited Development Dimension International Trainer and Success Profile Analyst. That is the first person that will be speaking to us as well in this particular program. The next first panelist on this program is someone I respect very well, an industry leader, HR practitioner that has over 25 years of experience, 2+ decades. All right. She's a business leader and executive coach and people and culture at Coca-Cola Hellenic Bottling Company. She has an MBA. She's an engineer by training. She's a senior HR professional, both at the senior level and at the global level. She has handled HR at several organizations, cutting across different industry at the strategic level. And so there's a lot of information she's going to be bringing on the table based on her wealth of experience. The third person is someone I respect as well, the former director of, the former president of CIPM. He's also the former director of Flour Mills Nigeria, and he's also going to be coming with a lot of experience. He has contributed in various areas with regards to HR and even re-engineering processes. He has also held leadership roles within professional institutions, and of course, he was the vice president 2 terms and president and chairman of the governing council of the Chartered Institute of Personnel Management. There's no other person than Wale Adediran. You are welcome, sir. And lastly, and not the least, is the group head of HR, First Bank, in person of Muyiwa Olulaja. Muyiwa is a trained KPMG assessor. He's also a self-certified evaluator and a DDI certified trainer. He is a personnel management institute, is a chartered institute of personnel management member, and also a member of the NITAD, which is the Nigerian Institute of Training and Development. He has over 25 years plus experience in handling HR matters, business matters, and he also sits at the strategy table. So most of the things he's also going to be sharing with us are things around his experience years. So let's just quickly move to the discussion for this morning. And I believe all my panelists are on camera, so we can actually have our conversation. Okay, so let's just jump into the conversation very quickly. And Innocent, I'm going to start with you, sir. Why is strategy important for organizational success? And what is the strategy development process?
Yeah,
why is strategy important? Okay, please go for it.
Thank you very much, Shehu. And I also want to use this opportunity to welcome all the participants. I've been asked to talk about what is strategy and, of course, why is it important for organization. Corporate strategy is the overarching plan or direction that is set by an organization to achieve long-term objectives and value. It normally defines how a company operates across different business units, markets, and industries. And one thing about strategy is that it also defines how resources are allocated to sustain competitive advantage and to ensure meaningful growth. Now, why is it important? The strategy is a template that an organization runs with. It's like the roadmap. It shows direction with regards to where we must go, the markets we must get into, the things that we must do, the strategic initiatives that must be put in place to ensure that we achieve the key goals that an organization is driving at. The key elements of strategy are the vision and mission, portfolio management, growth strategies, competitive advantage, and of course, how you can bring synergy, leveraging shared resources and capabilities across the business unit to maximize overall efficiency and profitability. How does normal organizations create strategy? But when we are talking about strategic failures, you will be looking at what are the framework. How do organizations put in place a strategy? The first thing is that they define the mission, a vision, and a mission with regards to where the company is going. Looking at the establishing the organization's core purpose and aspirations and visions. That's the first thing we do around when we're trying to develop a corporate strategy. And of course, the output of this phase is clear and inspiring vision and mission statements that will drive the organization. The next thing in the strategy development process is to analyze the current state of the business, understanding where the organization stands in terms of strength, in terms of weaknesses, in terms of opportunities and threats. And the key activities in here is to conduct the internal audit to evaluate resources, capabilities, and performance. Perform your external environmental analysis that would help you determine the SWOT and the PESTEL analysis, benchmarking against competitors and industry trends. And the output of this second stage is comprehensive situation analysis report. The third stage is then to set your strategic objectives. Here we define measurable goals that the organization aims to achieve within a specific timeline. And the fourth stage in developing a corporate strategy is to develop the strategic options. This is exploring and evaluating different pathways to achieve the objective, because there are several ways that lead to every market. Yeah. So we identify potential strategies, whether you want to use market penetration, product differentiation, vertical integration, or you want to do cost leadership, any one that you want to use. You then look at all the strategic options that you have and list the variable strategic options with preliminary assessments. Then the next stage is then to look at, evaluate, and select the best strategy from all the strategic alternatives that you have. And this is where organization needs to do a bit of more thorough work, assessing the options against criteria such as cost, risk, feasibilities, alignment, use decision-making framework to be able to determine what is best for them. And after you have created the strategy, you've agreed the options, the next thing is to develop an implementation plan. Translating this, your implementation plan translates the chosen strategy into actionable steps with very clear timelines and responsibilities. And after that, there is need for us to communicate the strategy, ensure all stakeholders understand the strategy and their roles in it. And last but not the least is to put in place an execution strategy. How do we then implement it? And the next thing we then do is to monitor, evaluate, and adjust the strategy based on market realities, using clear KPIs and dashboards to track, and of course, to institutionalize the strategy. embedding the strategy into the organization's culture and operations is the 10th step to take when we're trying to develop a strategy. So, I mean, that is how we create strategy, how we lead, how, I mean, the strategy development process. So those are the 10 steps to it. Thank you very much, Shew.
Thank you very much, Innocent. And I think that was a very good way to start the session. And just to do a very quick recap on what Innocent had said in terms of developing strategy, you start with a vision. We review our vision and our mission statement. We do strategy analysis. We set strategic objective, we develop these objectives, and then of course we evaluate the various selected strategies that we have using different selection method and decision-making methods. We communicate the strategy, or we come up with a communication plan, and of course we execute and evaluate the strategy. Thank you very much, Innocent. And you've also told us that strategy is actually the roadmap for the organization. It also helps us to be able to allocate resources appropriately. So thank you very much for that introduction. Now, just to set some ground rules, if you have any question in the course of the presentation.
One minute. Okay. Please, some people are trying to get into the webinar. They say they are finding it difficult. Okay. They've been trying to join the webinar, but all efforts have proved abortive. So would you want to take that, please?
All right. Thank you very much, Innocent, and I'm sure Uju will work on that. We have about 66 people already in the room, and that number is growing. Just in case you have a question, please, you could just go to the QA session and then type in your question, the process, and then we will read the question at that time. And there's also a poll that is being run concurrently, so we would like you to participate in the poll. We have a section for that poll, and we would we'll take every necessary discussions around the outcome of the poll. Okay, so Julia, I'm coming to you now. Innocent has just given us a background of the importance of strategy and the various stages via which strategy development goes through. Now, what role should HR department and people play in the successful development of strategies for their business? What role should HR department and of course the people play in successful development of strategy for their business?
Thank you very much, Shehu. I hope I'm audible.
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear.
Thank you. And thank you, Innocent, for a very comprehensive background on what strategy is. And so you asked what role? I would say that when it comes to strategy development, implementation, execution, and all that, it is centered around people. It starts and it ends with the people, right? And I would also like to give maybe a bit more simplified definition of strategy that people can connect with. Strategy is about making choices. Like Innocent said, there are many ways to skin the cat of the options that businesses have. It's about making the choice that helps the business to connect with the vision that it has. Simply put, yeah. And so how does HR come into this conversation? HR ought to, and I use the word advisedly, HR should be integral in the process of strategy definition. And the reason is very simple, because, I said strategy is about people. It's people who define the strategy. It's people who execute the strategy. It's people who are impacted by the strategy. And when we talk about people, it's even beyond our own, colleagues in the organization, our stakeholders, our customers, right? The people we're serving, they are impacted by whatever strategic choices we make. And therefore, it goes without saying that HR is not about being in the room. HR should be at the beginning, should be at the incubation stage, should be at the thinking stage of strategy definition and strategy articulation. Now, what you find in some organizations is that HR is limited to organize the strategy session, go and find the speakers. That shouldn't be. Things need to be such that we are right in the center, midwifing the process, yeah? Very, very important. Now, the second thing is around ensuring that whatever strategy the business is coming up with, there is an understanding of the implication on other relevant aspects. Again, I remind you, strategy is ultimately about people. People will be impacted, people will deliver. So with HR being part of the process, you are supporting the business to understand Whatever choices or options we make, how does it impact our structure? How does it impact organizational capabilities? How does it impact our culture? How does it impact the systems, the processes that we put in place? How does it impact the type of people we need to hire? How does it impact the infrastructure? And a very example you can think of, if you look at a courier company that has a very specific strategy that it should be maybe first to market, first to deliver, right? And for you to deliver that, you need to invest in not just assets. For example, if you're using your motorbike delivery guys, it's not just assets, it's connecting them with your ethos around customer service. If that is what you want to stand out for, it's letting them know that we are committing to delivering within a particular time frame. And HR plays an important role, and that thinking needs to start from the very beginning. The other thing is around HR being in that space and supporting the business to understand what are the change implications of the choice we're making. Now, let's remember, we're going to talk about why strategies fail. But one of the biggest reasons why strategies or projects fail is the fact that we underestimate how much change is required and the emotional impact of change. And we being in that space, we're able to help the business to connect with, okay, for every choice you make, these are the change impacts on everything that we stand for as a business. And lastly is also, how do we keep this fire of our new strategy? How do we keep it burning? How do we energize? How do we engage? How do we ensure that we are building parameters, we are building structures that support the strategy to succeed? All those thinking should happen at the beginning, not at the end, right? And HR is like the team or the resource or the capability that would always look at things from the broader people and business perspective. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Julia. And in summary, Julia has just clearly told us some very important points. In fact, I was just taking some notes. HR is the engine room for any successful strategy. She said it is, simply put, I like your definition of strategy, that it is about making choices. All right. And then you also mentioned that HR should actually be involved at the incubation stage. In fact, at every stage. So it's not only when it comes to implementation, we must be involved when the strategy is being conceptualized, articulated, and communicated. I really love that point as well. And of course, you talked about the fact that there is a lot of change events that happens as a result of implementing strategy, which is oftentimes underestimated. And so you also talked about the fact that that is where people get their motivation from. We need to keep the fire of the strategy burning all through, from the very beginning of development down to review of the strategy along the entire value chain. So thank you very much for that point. And we have said wonderful things about strategy, just listening to Innocent and Julia. But the reality, according to Harvard Business Reviews, that 60% to 90% of strategies are not fully executed, or they fail completely across several organizations globally. And we are wondering why this is the case. All right. We are going to be talking about why strategy fails. At this moment, this season, you'll agree with me that leaders in organizations have locked themselves up in what we call a strategy retreat, whether locally or globally, and they are brainstorming, coming out with a strategy for the year. This has become a routine. And yet, as the year goes by, it seems as though nothing significant really happened. The buzz is on now that we are having a strategy retreat. Everybody's talking about it. But for some reason, as the year goes by, it's as though the business is moving in a direction that is completely different from what we have with regards to what was said initially. So, Wale, I am coming to you now. What are the common reasons why strategy failed during the development phase? You are muted, sir. Please, you may need to unmute yourself.
Apologies. Good morning, everyone, again.
Good morning.
And thanks, fantastic background from Innocent and Julia. I would like to start from additional definition to what it is before I speak about why it fails, especially at the development stage. And mine will be with a little story. We all hear about AI being smart. And I want to tell you, it's not that AIs are smarter than humans. It's just that they are far faster than humans. So they are able to run iterations within a limited time. So they try everything that won't work before they finally get what will work, and they stick to it. Unfortunately, humans do not have unlimited time, and we don't have the other resources that money will buy. Money cannot buy time. So those two resources, those two types of resources are limited. Time, which money cannot buy, and other resources that money can buy. And every organization contends with that challenge. And that's the reason why it's important to spend more time to reflect on your strengths, your weaknesses, what is happening around you, and then make a plan to get what you really want before you jump into execution. So making that choice, spending time to reflect, to think through, to make the right choice is the process of developing strategy. So strategy is about defining where you want to play and how you want to win, because resources are limited. So if that be the case, therefore, why would it fail even at the developmental stage? First is if you don't have competent and passionate leadership that can come with clear vision and stretch targets. From developmental stage, strategy will fail because you are starting with a foundation that is below par, first of all. Secondly, if such leaders do not engage the right stakeholders, and I say this to all my HR colleagues, every leader of every organization or business requires the support of whoever runs the people's strategy and those who run the financial strategy. So the financial leaders are the right hand, and the HR leaders or people system leaders are the left hand of the CEO or the head of the organization. So if the leaders are not engaged early, like Julia said, it's not about being at the table. It's about being involved, being a major role player in creating, orchestrating, carving the strategy. So HR people that will be successful are those who understand that role that they play. They are not just to perform the functional HR roles. They are also to perform as part of leadership of the business, to be the left hand or right hand, as you may have it, of the business leader, of the organization leader, and help to bring the right stakeholders to the table when you are discussing about the strategy of the business. The other reason why it fails at developmental stage is lack of solid data. You know, strategy thrives by knowledge. So you need to know yourself. You need to know the environment in which you operate. You need to know the evolution that's happening in that environment. If you're in the commercial space, what is happening in the market? You need to know where the trend is going. I tell you, in Nigeria today, many organizations have failed already because they don't even understand the impact that AI, sorry, I'll be talking a lot about AI because I'll be speaking to some folks about it on Saturday. They don't understand what the changes that AI is driving across the world. And only businesses that understand that will develop the right strategy, and a strategy that will not fail. So strategies will fail if you don't have the right knowledge, the solid data about yourself, about your environment, and about evolution of the market. The other reason why strategy fails at that developmental phase is people tend to shy away from embracing change. We're like the proverbial frog, that sits in comfort zone and a cold pot of water, and water is boiling underneath, and until it's totally boiled and it's difficult or impossible to escape, the frog will keep adjusting. So that's what most organizations do. And I can cite so many examples from the past, even from recent times in our home country, Nigeria, We're shouting about organizations that shut down recently. Why is it that their peers are not shutting down? It's because for some, they anticipated the change. For others, they do not. So in strategy development, if you don't anticipate changes and build it into your plan, then the strategy will fail even at the developmental phase. Let me stop there so that others can build on it.
Thank you very much, Wale, for that wealth of knowledge shared. I really liked your definition of strategy as well, just adding to the wealth of definitions we already have here. Just as a quick recap, you said strategy is defining where you want to play and how you want to play. I think I like that definition a lot, simply put. And then you have given us some reasons that are very common why it fails all across the entire value chain. The one that struck me the most was the fact that you talked about incompetent and lack of passionate leadership. That is key. It's something that people will overlook, but it's a big deal. If the leadership are not passionate about ensuring the strategy is achieved, for some reason, it fails. You talked about stakeholders and the role HR plays in bringing stakeholders, everyone into the table when the strategy is being developed. Because if we don't have those stakeholders on the table, we may likely have issues. The last one you mentioned that struck me the most was talking about business intelligence, gathering intelligence from within the organization, from within the industry, and also from global trends and events. So all of these things form our strategy. So thank you very much for sharing. I'll move to you, Muyiwa, and just to round up this, using relevant examples, how can companies ensure that their strategies are effectively implemented and don't fall short? Wale has just told us reasons across the entire value chain why it fails, but what are examples you have that you can share with us that can help us mitigate this particular issue? How can companies ensure their strategies are effectively implemented and do not fall short of the plan? Over to you, sir.
Well, thank you very much, Shim. And I really want to appreciate the earlier speakers, very distinguished, HR leaders, and that I owe in excel. I won't have to give additional definition and of strategy. I think that has been dealt with extensively. So I will stick to the implementation bit and then come back a little bit to your question proper. There is a popular quote by Thomas Edison, and that says that strategy without execution is just hallucination. So I'm sure a number of us that is on the call might probably be familiar with that popular quote. And for me and for our organization, First Bank, it's something that we expand extensively. Again, because the immediate CEO of the bank, Adibino, used that to drive execution of strategy and intently and be across the entire institution. That's why he was here. So we are extremely ruthless at this when it comes to strategy execution. When you look at strategy itself, the beautiful work that you mentioned earlier, Shiv, that people go to do at the Q4, particularly at this point in time when leaders, directors, and we go to lock themselves at this new room and come up a little bit with that strategy document. And we come to naught if there is no execution firepower. So which implies that you really must be very ruthless about execution. And which, in my own view, is the main reason and why that strategy that doesn't get implemented. At the heart of it really is the people. And unlike when Julia mentioned people at various times. Most business leaders, and again, I flip through a little bit, some of the participants that we have here. We have business leaders, HR, seasoned HR people that's in the call. And again, you find that most organizations, they tend to discountenance the role of HR and be at the point of strategy, conceptualization. So at the point of articulating strategy, conceptualizing strategy, and coming up with that white paper or the blueprint and that will then guide the direction of focus and of the business in the coming year. So deliver people. So because imagine that people will always be there to deal with that. At the heart of strategy execution is people. So that is extremely critical. So if you do not have people in the room at the point of even conceptualizing your strategy, so you can be rest assured that it's already dead on arrival. My own common saying is that strategy document is just that, is just a paper. So the efficacy of that strategy document is in the implementation. And at the heart of that implementation is the people that will then drive that implementation. And that again, will be connect with the organizational culture. And I'm sure a number of us are also familiar with the saying, says, culture we eat up strategy, for breakfast, for lunch, for dinner. So which means that culture becomes so strong to the extent that strategy will give way if you do not consider the organizational culture, even at the point of crafting your strategy. So if there is a conflict between strategy and the organizational culture, you realize that the strategy how to the structure or to the culture of the institution. The people that will drive the strategy, there are people within that institution. If you have a strategy that is dysfunctional with the organizational culture, you realize that that strategy will be left abandoned because there is no one to drive the execution of it. I think that is the context that I thought that is important. But in addition to that, because things that we had asked that I should give you a practical example, I will try not to go so deeply into specific example as it concerns my bank, but clearly, I can say that we understand the need for strategy articulation, but much more strategy, and you cascade it across the entire business unit and across the entire organization, such that everyone can then buy into that strategy. If you don't have people that buy into your strategy, that strategy is a mere piece of paper. So because people will go at different tangents from the strategy that you've come up with. So involvement of key stakeholders is extremely critical as well. And who are your key stakeholders? Not only the external stakeholders, not only your regulators really, but again, the people that will then make or give life to the strategy, and which you get speaks a little bit to people that Julia, reiterated a bit earlier. Communication is key. People must communicate, they must live it, they must breathe it, they must understand it, they must mouth it, they must entrench it. So you speak to your strategy, you must understand it like the back of your hand to the extent that you can then live it. Otherwise, you would not believe in that strategy. Your strategy mustn't be something very vague, become too difficult for people to internalize. So to that degree, you must be able to simplify it at least in few words, such that people can connect easily with it. So if you find people along the corridor and say, what exactly is the strategy of the institution at this particular year or in the coming year, people should be able to connect easily with it. Again, rolling into that is resource alignment. We are currently in the year 3 of Great Resignation. So we saw what happened in 2022. First Bank had its unfair share of that Great Resignation. We also saw what happened last year. Most organizations also had to crumble under the weight of Great Resignation, which a number of us call Jackpot in this part of the world. And mainly because of the restlessness that you find that is in the marketplace, because of the imbalance between the demand and the supply of labor. And that again created some other activities in terms of wage escalation and the rest of them, because the few talent that you then have in the market needs to be highly priced, because everyone wants to ensure that you have a safe stock there. Resource alignment is critical. So if you have a strategy and you don't have the right resources that to be able to drive implementation of that strategy, you can as well just drop your strategy, because that strategy will not implement itself. You need resources that will then implement that strategy. And on the back of that is constant monitoring. And I think Mr. Dijeron, mentioned that this during the course at the office when he was responding to his question. You must continually ensure that you're monitoring the implementation of that strategy. So it's not something that you start up, go to sleep, maybe by mid-year, you then come back to see how far you fared and all of that. No, you must cascade. Strategy speak to long term, and from that long term, chop it at least into medium term, and you chop it at least into short term. And on an ongoing basis, that we are checking deviation at least from targets, how far have you gone and the rest of them, and to that degree, at least you are able to make the amendments. There is nothing wrong during the course of your implementation and ability to make a detour, particularly when you realize that some of those metrics or indices that you had set at the beginning, which form the assumption upon which the strategy was crafted, are no longer realistic and based on market forces. So you can come back again and say, you know what, the strategy is not going to work. Because the shareholders will not listen to you at the end of the year when you are not able to deliver value to them. And say, well, it was because we choose the wrong strategy. Nobody cares about that. So what is important is that you have opportunity to course correct during the course of the year so that there is a need to make amendment to that. It's also critical. And I think just rounding up is around agility and flexibility. Agility is extremely critical. So we talk about agility, and simply means that fail fast, fail forward. So you don't wait at least, to go into your R&D setting and maybe to go and build something very audacious, big, and the rest of them. No. Rather, you can start small and begin to build upon it. So which implies that you have opportunity that, look, this didn't work, then you can build upon it. And even as you're failing forward, you're not failing backward. And you also do not need a little bit to wait a little bit to have something very big, before you get started. So again, we've seen some of these things work in our own environment. I mentioned again that for every organization, you need to be extremely ruthless about that execution of strategy. It's good to spend time with the crafting of strategy, and set that context earlier. But I think the bigger responsibility is to ensure that there is a resource alignment to be able to drive execution of strategy. And that is the place where people then play very significant role, where the organizational culture plays very significant role. I will round up by reiterating the fact that when you are crafting your strategy and HR is missing, that strategy is doomed to fail. That's it. It's just going to fail. So if you are crafting your strategy and you are at variance with organizational culture, you are mindful of the culture of the institution, you can be rest assured that that strategy will fail. So there should be an alignment. So for the business leaders and who have responsibility for driving strategy or articulating strategy, you must ensure that you have people that live on the table so that you can co-create that strategy, and you can then give it the firepower because there will be proper alignment with the culture of the institution. So I will stop there, Sheil. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much. Very, very insightful. I just had a whole lot I was jotting. I even lost trail of my own thought as I was writing as well, because there was just a whole lot of information to grapple with. So thank you so much for the information. And I also like the fact that you talked about ruthless execution. In fact, the way you talked about ruthless of execution, you mentioned it about 7 times in your presentation. And just to let us understand that execution is what gives us the result. And I like the 2 quotes you made. You talked about strategy without execution is hallucination by Thomas Edison. And the other one you quoted by Peter Drucker, that culture eats strategy for breakfast. These were very, very good points that you raised. The last point you raised that I would like everyone to remember, fantastic point, was that if HR is not involved in crafting the strategy, it is very likely to fail. So thank you very much for that. And please, can we keep our question running, our audience? We have almost 80 people in the room. And I know that while the presentations were going on, people had questions in mind. So please drop your questions in the Q&A section, as Uju will be sharing the polls again. I would like to know what people are thinking with regards to the polls. But while that is happening, there is a question someone has dropped would like to ask. So there are polls, just 3 questions. Please, would like you to participate in the poll, and then we'll be sharing the result, which will lead to the next stage of the discussion. And this question goes to either you or Muiwa or Julia. Somebody asked the question because Muiwa, you stated clearly that if HR is not involved in the crafting of the strategy, then the strategy will likely fail. And this person is asking that in my organization, HR is not part of it. HR is asked to execute whatever strategy that comes out of it. How do we succeed in this kind of setting? Because the way the organization is set up, we are not involved in that conversation. HR, we report under admin. And so it's tough for us to have a voice on the strategy table. So what do you suggest we can do to still succeed under this kind of setup?
Thank you so much, Sheo. And thanks for that question and the person that posed the question. I think that's the reason why this platform was set up so that we can all share knowledge, experiences, and all of that. I think the takeaway for that organization or for that individual is that begin to do internal lobby such that you can get the management and the leadership of the organization to understand that your people agenda cannot stand with one leg. So if you are coming up with a people agenda as a strategy, and meanwhile you were not even part of that strategy conceptualization, so you then possibly have an agenda that is big and which is your next choice. So HR needs to be at the table, discussing strategy articulation. HR needs to be part of that conversation, discussing assumptions. And I give you an example. We see today, coming year, 50% by research, 50% of the world population will be made up of Gen Zs and millennials. So the question is that data is only known to you as HR. It's not known to the business leaders. So what are the consequences of that, even to the strategy being formulated? So again, Mr. Didiron mentioned the AI earlier, Gen AI. What are the implications of that? Technological advancement and the rest of it. So how do you even have the future-ready skills to be able to drive the aspiration and be of the institution? So what would you need to begin to do to ensure that people have relevant skills, competencies, they have the proficiency level relevant and to the competencies and for the job that they do, and they're not carrying up to this skill set. If you do not, if leadership may not know that. So if HR is not at the table when strategy is being crafted, you probably then have a strategy, but you don't have resources that will match that strategy. That's the honest truth. Because you get into the space, you realize that, sorry, we have a built-in strategy in our hand. That strategy is just a mere piece of paper, because the human being that will give life to that strategy from an execution perspective is missing. Because that human being, which should have been at the table and when that strategy was being crafted, there was no voice from that space. So my radical recommendation to that organization really is first and foremost to elevate the role of HR in that organization. HR is not administration. HR is strategic. So it's a tool to unlock value for the institution. And again, we must ensure that we persuade leadership to understand that and also demonstrate value, to the organization such that they can elevate that role and be significant. Otherwise, you will run and build responsibility and strategy. When you get into the space that we implement it, execution will fail ultimately. And again, remember the quote I mentioned earlier: strategy without execution is just hallucination. And
Okay.
I don't think anyone wants to hallucinate.
Thank you very much for that. And I believe the person that asked that question is satisfied with the response. Thank you very much. You have highlighted some additional points that HR practitioners need to live here with. We need to learn to do internal lobbying. We must be able to speak the language of the business. That is using HR metrics to speak to business issues. And then HR is not admin. HR is a strategic arm of the business. And our ability to use the information we have as HR to persuade leadership is what brings us to the table. Thank you very much, Miwa, for that. A poll is currently going on, so please, I'd like us to do that. We'll jump into the poll very, very quickly. But Julia, there's a question again that we have here would like you to respond to. This person is saying that they are having issues with strategy not working with reality. That the way strategy is being implemented in their organization is such that when things change, they don't change the strategy. So the strategy is not realistic again. And that is the challenge. So people don't believe in the strategy across the year. And the person cited COVID-19 as an example and said that the organization was still making demands on the strategy when we all know what happened in the environment. How should this kind of issues be addressed? And what is probably wrong with the strategy that we may need to understand to be able to address this kind of challenge? Julia.
Okay, thank you very much. Very important question. I believe that Miwa alluded to some of it. Strategy does not operate in a vacuum.
Okay.
There are competitive sets, there are global environmental implications, economic realities that will drive the choices that you make. Okay. Now, in each choice, Innocent also spoke about option. In each choice, there should be various scenarios. What if, even though I've made a choice, if this happens, what do I do? If that happens, what do I do? And 2023 is a very good example. When we started the year with dollar at 400 and something, by middle of the year, things have changed. I would expect every business, every well-run business to go back and say, what does this mean? And like Wale said, knowledge is important. So even before we got there, we should have anticipated how would what we are seeing, what data is telling us, how would it impact our business? And how does that make us to adjust, adapt, tweak, or completely change the plans that we have? So you must have a process, and it's not something that just happens, somebody wakes up. There must be a process where you're looking at the data. There's a process where you're looking at the trend and what that is telling you, and a process to review your choices, to make different set of decisions, or to further amplify the decisions that you have made. So if I take the COVID example that you've made, there were winners and there were losers. The winners were those who were able to read the room. They understood that COVID was an opportunity. Yes, it had risk, but if you look at it differently, it could be an opportunity. There were businesses who made more money during COVID than when there was no COVID. There are businesses that are making more money with the FX. I'm looking at somebody on the screen. The banks have been the most profitable sector in this economy compared. They are making money. Yeah, maybe it's not so sustainable. But even some other organizations not in FSI, they are making money because they understand I need to be agile. Somebody spoke about what does agility. It's moving with the times, being aware of the assumptions that have shifted, what is happening, and what changes you need to make as a business. Thank you.
Thank you, Julia. And just like a prophet, you answered the next question I would have asked. Sheon Koka was saying, sir, could you please expatiate on agility aspect of strategy execution? And that was how Julia rounded off her session. So thank you very much for that response. And I think that the person that asked the question, yes, Innocent, please go for it.
Yeah, a question just came in now. It says that, how do we apply this concept in the public sector?
Okay.
I don't know whether any of our panelists can help. I know Wale used to be the president of CIPM. He's engaged a lot with the public sector.
Let me try to assist with that.
All right.
Yeah.
And I will connect that to the question around HR not being involved, because HR is pushed into admin. And I think somebody started the conversation already by speaking to the need for you not to I think it's Muiwa that mentioned you need to get involved in the politics in quotes of the place. And for what does politics of the workplace mean? It doesn't mean you start doing partisan advocacy. It's more around getting to know. Julia just talked about knowing. You need to know your business. You need to know the business of your business. You need to know how the business makes business of your business. Okay, let me break it down. If it's a for-profit business, you need to know how the business makes profit. What are the critical drivers of profit making for the business? If it is a government establishment, you need to understand how that department or agency of government delivers what the CEO of government, could be local government chairman, could be commissioner, could be governor, wants out of that agency. So if, for instance, you are working in Lagos State government, the governor wants to be popular. He wants to deliver a project that will make him win re-election, either for himself or for his party. So how does your agency contribute to that? Do you really understand it? And when you understand it, how does it affect the way you work, the way you participate in the activities of the agency? So in the public service, believe me, it's the easiest place to get known as a strategic role player, because all you need to do, in fact, politics is welcome there, and that's not partisan politics, but more of understanding the business of that agency. So if you work in Lamata, what the governor wants to do in his strategy that has T as a component is to turn Lagos State to a smart city. And Lamata plays a critical role. Lamata wants to provide multimodal transport system for Lagos. So how does your own unit contribute to that? You need to know. After you have known, it needs to show in the way you do your work. And after it's showing, you need to have conversations around it. You need to demonstrate that passion. People should know you are Mr. Lamata or Mrs. Lamata or Miss Lamata. It should be part of your inner passion. It should show in every conversation you hold. You are not trying to impress anybody, because people will misunderstand and misrepresent you as trying to impress. But rather, it's just a genuine passion to see that agency succeed. When you do that, you won't know that people are watching you. And when the time comes for them to develop the strategy for that unit, they will think about, someone will remember you and ask why you are not invited to be at the table. It's as simple as that. And communicate your progress. Don't keep it to yourself. You see, you're as good as your communication of how good you are. If you are good and you don't communicate, you're as good as those who are not good and don't or do communicate. So communicate what you do. Communicate what you know. Communicate how you are making a difference. So it applies in the public service. It also applies in a private sector that does not understand the strategic need of HR. When you communicate, don't limit it to what is happening internally only. Get to know what is happening out there. Bring it inside. If nobody wants to invite you to a boardroom to make a presentation, at lunch period, gather your colleagues together. Ask them what they are thinking about the subject. Guys, have you heard about this AI thing? What do you guys think? Someone will hear you when you do these things, and they will invite you to come and talk to a more powerful audience that can make the decisions. So don't accept defeat. Don't accept limitations. Challenge it. Push the boundary. Not by partisan politics, but by knowing the business of your business and how your business does that business. Thank you.
Fantastic. So there's another question. It says that there are prescriptive measures to take when strategies are failing. Any of our panelists can take this.
Okay, so
And
it's
there are prescriptive measures, preemptive, measures to take when strategies are failing.
Okay, so I mean, I can start and then the gentleman can add and build on it. The one thing that we've established is a need to monitor. So you don't just define your strategy. You also need to have mechanisms where you're monitoring and evaluating the efficacy of the strategy. We also spoke that strategy does not operate in a vacuum. So you must be aware of what are the trends and how will this trend potentially impact your strategy, right? You also want to set up structures where you are checking where you are at per time. So if we say, for example, from our roadmap, we need to be accomplishing X, Y, Z, and you see over 1 month, 2 months, what you thought you should have received or achieved, despite everything you've done, is still not coming through. It's a good point to check and say, is this working, right? What I'm saying in essence is that the idea is not to get to the point of absolute failure. The idea is to have mechanisms in place that help you to monitor efficacy, results, and outcomes so that you can take incremental changes or incremental decisions that help you to course correct almost immediately. And I'll give you a very good example, again, going back to FX. There are a lot of businesses who would buy import stuff as part of their input. A business that is conscious of the ecosystem that is operating within will know, even before we had the FX issue, that their choice was not sustainable. I would have expected that sort of business to start looking at, how do I localize my input? How do I look for local alternatives? Now, if that particular business had started working on that, and then we had our FX issue, and sort of, things are looking bad, I would expect a business that is forward thinking to say, how do I accelerate the choice I've already made to localize? Now, that means there is an ongoing review of business performance, the result, again, using data at every given point to be able to identify when things will not work, and then you are course correcting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Julia, for that response. And there's a follow-on question here from Deborah Adekomi. She says, please, can you give us effective mechanisms to monitor our strategy as we move on, most especially for companies that make a lot of adjustments as the year progresses? So this is a follow-on question from the response that Julia had given. And I just to, before Julia takes it on, and Julia talked about the fact that we must have a dashboard, that gives us indications where things are going, and just to ensure that we don't have a total breakdown before we discover that things are already going in the wrong direction. So this person is asking, what are the effective mechanisms to monitor this? Julia, maybe in 1 minute, if you could take this. Thank you.
So one thing I will say very quickly, gone are the days of doing 3-year, 5-year plans. They don't work anymore. Even your 1-year plan can be dated in the first 3 months. So one of the mechanisms you need to have is to short-circuit your review process. Goes back to dashboarding, use technology at every given point, know where you are. And once you have that data, you can easily say, we need to pivot. Now, for you to pivot, you need to have anticipated what may happen. That goes to scenario planning, which we don't do very well as businesses. If a business is good with data mining and big data analysis, you can use trend analysis to say, what are the scenarios that can play out? You can also use Gen AI to think of various responses to different scenarios, so that when those things happen, all you are doing is just plugging and playing. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Julia. I loved the point you have dropped there: big data mining and analysis, Gen AI, and of course, scenario planning. So I'm sure Deborah Komi has the information she needs. So thank you very much. Uju, please, can we share the outcome of the poll? We have over almost 80 people in the room. Could you just share the outcome of the poll, and then we're about rounding off now, hopefully within the next few minutes. Okay. Wow. Interesting. So I'll just read the outcome. What is your biggest challenge when creating a strategy? The biggest one stated here that covered about 51% is gaining stakeholder buy-in and support. This is the biggest issue the people in the room are having. And then Then the next biggest one is aligning strategy with organizational priorities. But the big elephant in the room here is gaining stakeholder buy-in and support. The second question was, what do you find most difficult during strategy implementation? Apparently, we have 4 issues of almost equal strength in terms of voting, but although the highest with about 31% says managing resistance to change. And then, of course, we have ensuring team alignment and collaboration, allocating sufficient resources and budgets, monitoring progress, and making necessary adjustments. So these are the voices of the people. Now, the last point here is what factors most often derails your strategy. The biggest here, which is about 39%, is limited leadership involvement. This is tough for me, although it aligns with what Mola had mentioned, but it's really tough for me to see that the people that put the strategy in place, a lot of people are saying that they are not involved. Somebody would like to talk about this soon, and then as we go to the next round of questions. And then someone says shifting organizational priorities, okay, is another very big issue. Is there anything you like to speak on? This last one is quite critical, and I would like someone to talk on that. How can we say that leadership were responsible for creating and developing strategies, and the people here are saying that there is a limited leadership involvement? This is a contrast for me. Is there anyone that would like to speak to this?
Let me do that.
All right, thank you.
Nobody will give you the tickets to the game on a platter. You won't get it. That's not that wasn't my experience. And I'm talking about over 30 years of working.
Wow.
You need to show that you deserve it at the next level before you don't. And there are various ways you could show it. The most effective way to show it is your ownership, your passion, and your knowledge of the business. Grow your knowledge of the business. Grow your passion for the business. Demonstrate your ownership of the business. And I'm not talking of just private sector, but even public sector. So when you do this consistently, and it is real, because if you are pretending, they will read through you, and you ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask questions. If strategy document is brought to you, the blueprint is brought to you, and you are asked to organize a deployment session to communicate it, go through it, understand it fully, and back and ask questions. I'm not saying cook up the questions, but I'm saying genuinely seek to understand that strategy, put yourself in the shoes of those who put it together, and try to understand what they were trying to do. And go back and ask questions in areas where you believe probably things should have looked different from your own perspective, probably where something might have been missed, probably where you don't fully understand what you are being given. But if you are the type that they just give the document to you, and the next thing you do is you wear your event planner cap, they will continue to use you as an event planner. But if you take it further, by challenging the thinking, seeking to understand the thinking, demonstrate ownership for the thinking, and probably making suggestions for the future. By the time whoever listens to you sees the value in your thought pattern, you will be involved in the next run. And you don't go demanding it. I'm in HR. I'm the HR in charge. Therefore, why are you involving me? Is a ticket to exit. But the best way you will ask for it without asking for it is to demonstrate that ownership, that thirst and appetite, hunger to know, to do, to make the business succeed. You will be by and by. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I really love that point. Ownership, passion, hunger for delivery, especially for everyone at the leadership level, is extremely important. Is there anything our other panelists would like to weigh in on? Muyiwa would like to say something.
Thank you so much, Shiu. And again, I can't agree more with Wale, on that point. I'm also not particularly surprised by the outcome of the poll. So when you look at the discordance between leadership and also the strategy, they are supposed to sit because strategy is actually supposed to be owned 100% by the leadership and the of the institution. But you also know that depends on the size of the institution and the makeup. So some organizations might be financially healthy without necessarily having a cutthroat and a strategy. But again, it can never be a sustainable way of doing business when you don't have a clearly defined strategy that will show you the pathway and to your end goals. I think that is extremely important. I understand from the perspective that oftentimes you see resistance mounting, even from the people who are supposed to own this strategy document. You see resistance mounting, particularly from those, the leadership who are supposed to be at the forefront of executing some of those strategic priorities that they had agreed. So they like the fanfare, going on strategy retreats, sometimes even outside of the country and all of that, but when they come back, commitment and leading to driving that strategy execution. So they fall flat because again, they get swarmed at this in the day-to-day operational routine task activities, and they just assume that after all the organization is making money. Rather, there is wide gap between what they had set out to achieve as well as what they're doing. Sometimes discordance, between what they had agreed initially. And you then realize that you need someone to begin to pull them and back and be on track. And my point, just to summarize, is the fact that leadership have responsibility to own the outcome and of that strategy. They also have responsibility to ensure that there is sufficient willpower to be able to drive execution and of that strategy. And they also then need to go further by ensuring that there is mechanism and ability to do or to track performance, flexibility and the outcome which is intended for the strategy. They must ensure that they have that board that Julia mentioned, so that on an ongoing basis, and they are checking it against target. So what the delta between what we had anticipated that we want to be and where are we right now, and how do we then ensure that we close that gap significantly? Okay. So if there is a need for them on an ongoing basis, and to course correct, then make some tweakings, change assumptions, refuel and all of that during the course of the year. I think it's that important. Ownership of the strategy outcome, I think is extremely important. All right. And leadership is very dominant. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very, very much. Okay, Julia, you have would like to say something. We have just one question to ask, and maybe we'll take everything together by the time I ask the question. Someone has this question, very critical. He said, what exactly are the roles of external consultants? All right. And how can organizations leverage them in the development, execution, tracking, the entire value chain of strategy? So you could add that to whatever it is you like to say. Julia, please.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to make a quick point as I reflect on what Wale and Miwa said and it's an anomaly to say you don't get leadership buy-in. The question is why? We make assumptions that everybody understood what we discussed at the strategy session. But the reality is that not everybody understood what it means. They don't understand what it means at an enterprise level. They don't understand what it means at their functional level. So it's a big assumption. And part of how businesses can overcome that is being intentional to check in. Maybe at that session or follow-on session, what did we all take away from this meeting? What is it that we are going to do? And how is it that we are going to do it? Is extremely important. The second thing is that who is responsible for doing what? What is being done? Who is responsible? How are we holding people accountable? They think it's the strategy department that is responsible. No. Until we break down that strategy into functional implication, clear functional plans, and we have mechanisms to measure, then we ended up in funfair, like Muyiwa said. Yeah, I just thought to pitch that in. And so that's why you see the disconnect, because the structure to take it from paper to reality has not been sort of imputed. Now, talking about external parties, the beauty is that I've led strategy session as a consultant, and I have managed strategy session for my employer, so I understand. Now, you also need to know what is the most important area that you want a third party to be involved in. You can choose to do it fully internally. You can choose to say, okay, based on some of the things that are important for us, we want to get maybe an economics. I've always found bringing external economists to talk to us as extremely valuable, because you see that insight they bring from a macro and micro perspective forms part of the foundation of what we do. So it's important to decide what you want. The other thing that I've also realized over time is when you are doing your internal assessment, you are doing a SWOT, or you're looking at the environment, you need sometimes an objective party. Because if I tell you to do a SWOT of yourself, the likelihood of you being very glowing and not really touching the meat of the matter is very high. So you need a bit of independence in some of those things. You could also say, depending on the dynamics of the organization, you want to get an external facilitator. Now, external facilitators may not own the content. What they are doing is to work with you across the process from the beginning to the end, to manage the conversation, but all the inputs are coming from you. There's also the bit where you can say, let's make it turnkey. We get an external facilitator to run everything from beginning to the end. And I'll give you my personal experience. The most impactful strategy session and outcome I've had been the one where we had very solid internal involvement. You need people to be involved in the thinking. You need them to be involved in the doing. You need them to be involved in the compilation. That way you drive ownership. Now, that is not to say there are not spots that you can say work with a third party, but if you want people to believe in this thing and to own it, my recommendation would be try and keep it as internal as possible. Make sure that it's owned by the business and the relevant parties within the business.
Right. Thank you very much, Julia. And Muyiwa, I saw you nodding your head. Is there something you'd like to add? Before then, Julia, you have highlighted three things. You've highlighted the fact that it's more or less like a symbiotic relationship, but internal participation is extremely important. And external participation comes on the backdrop of transparency, trust, because especially when it comes to the area of doing anonymous surveys, sometimes it's best to get a third party to run that, just to be able to instill trust in the system, and also someone that will be able to transport or to facilitate the process, especially coming with skills. Muyiwa, I don't know what you would like to add to this. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, Shil. Julia was spot on. And again, that was the reason why I was not in agreement and with all the points that she raised. As a matter of fact, the reason why a lot of people will be chicken out when they get to execution is because they were never part of that they were never part of that conceptualization. So they over rely on external parties to come help them at this in the articulation. Meanwhile, what they were supposed to be doing, is facilitating and the conversation at the leadership level, such that leaders can be part of that creation and of that strategy. So, but when you leave it in the hands of external facilitators, that is the consultant. So you see that wide gap, particularly when that document is not left with them and they be aloof. So realistically, you can't have an external facilitator, based on my own experience, to come and drive implementation for you. And the reason is because of the organization nuances and the culture that I spoke to earlier. So there is no way, at least, you bring in an external person that will understand that there's some of the dynamics that be within the organization, the workings and all of that. So the pitfalls, the do's and don'ts and the rest of them, that might probably make an strategy work or not work. So where I believe that external party consultants will bring significant value is actually at the facilitation stage, where you are co-creating a leader strategy, because they'll be able to bring in maybe best practice, either within that immediate market or maybe external market and all of that. They will bring all of those perspectives to bear. Why the internal team also will help and in doing what? In fact, checking and saying, look, this is what we have based on the data. They can use your data for iteration. Then you get this into the strategy session proper. So the facilitation really should be co-owned by the internal team as well as the external part, such that the leadership is fully involved in the creation, or the crafting of that strategy document. By that, moving into implementation and it will become very similar. But if there is a disconnect between the strategy people or the consultant that have come a little bit to help you in crafting your strategy, as well as those that who are supposed to drive implementation of the strategy, you realize that gap has become very wide. And on that basis, because they won't come back to say, sorry, we're completely aloof and doing this session. So what they then do is they also quietly pack that document somewhere. And they also just move at least into their comfort zone and keep doing what they can do. So long as the money, so long as they can see the numbers adding up. And they just leave that and they be quietly. And that's what again and we have seen and be over time and with some organization. So again, in effect, they must code it and the implementation and maybe should be handled by the internal team. However, where there is a need to bring in a consultant and maybe on a need basis to help and maybe unlocking, re-explaining, or bringing and maybe excellent perspective, market dynamics and the rest of them, fantastic, they can do that within the year. But the involvement in terms of implementation itself, I think in that organization and it should be that it should be left and it's in the hand of the leadership and cascaded and be across various BUs or business units. That's what I mean. Thank you.
All right, Muyiwa, thank you very much for that explicit, detailed aspect of involvement of external facilitators. I would like Innocent to round off this session, and I know we have about 5 minutes to 12:30 as we round off. Innocent, over to you.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for, you're making our time to be part of this webinar. And I want to believe that this webinar has been useful in terms of from knowledge sharing perspective and from experience gathering perspective. We want to wish all of you, we want to pray that all of you will be able to help your organizations to be able to put in place the right strategies and of course to implement such strategies. There are areas where I listened to Muyiwa and Julia when they were talking about the involvement of consultants. Sometimes too, one of the areas where strategy go wrong is having the wrong consultant. I've attended strategy sessions before where everybody's intention is they just feel strategy session period is a time to come and rest and play. Ordinarily, it is not. There is a lot of work that needs to happen before the strategy session. Before the strategy session, which is information gathering, so that your strategy sessions will be as much as possible data-driven, and people can be speaking to live issues going on within the organization. I think one of the benefits of actually bringing in an external consultant is that external consultants are not biased. They will be able to ask the right questions and everybody will be able to make contributions into it. There are times during strategy development sessions where you ask people to submit their inputs anonymously so that somebody doesn't go and be saying things that his line manager does not agree with, or he doesn't want to be seen to be at variance with his line manager. So all those kind of things, you need an external consultant to help you. So areas where you really need, where we support organizations, for instance, it's in the area of customized strategy workshops. We do that a lot. We've done it for both public sector and private sector organizations. We've also done it for both large, medium-scale enterprises. Now, we've also helped organizations in organizational transformation support. One of the things to see in strategy area is the area where you see leadership alignment is one of the things that we also help organizations to be able to do. We help organizations to go through all the strategic planning framework step by step. And while we are doing that, we engage directly with the line managers and leadership to be able to actually draw out where they are going and then help craft enough questions that will enable us get to the end of it. So we support at every stage external support in the area of environmental analysis and internal environment analysis for you. We help facilitate your strategic options. We then also help you to put together your strategy documents. We don't write it for them. We don't write it for you. We facilitate the sessions and we help document all that has been discussed. At the strategy phase, the implementations phase, we also help walk through the HR, the departments, various departments to help cascade and to also help them. We work with the leadership in there to help cascade the corporate strategy into their departmental strategy. And we do that a lot for the HR department. Leadership team and culture alignments as well, that sometimes cannot be driven by people within the system. You need external people, particularly when you are talking about culture alignments and all that. External consultants will help in that area. Workforce planning needs to be developed in-house, and that's one of the things that the in-house HR people will need to do very well. Communication and change management is one area where we can also support you. And of course, in the area of monitoring and reporting, we could work with those that are responsible in the area of monitoring and reporting for your organizations. And of course, continuous strategy refinement. So those are the areas how HCP can support any organization. And for those that we've worked with in the past, they've been able to confirm the things we've done in this regard. And for anybody on this platform, any organization on this platform that asks for our support in this area, you're automatically entitled to 10% of the fees that we normally use to facilitate strategy session. So it's just for you to say you're on this platform, and we can see the evidence that you were actually on this platform, and your organization will enjoy that discount as we help in supporting the things you do in that area. So I thank you very much for coming, ladies and gentlemen. We appreciate your being here. So I would yield the room back to Shehu right now for him to do the final talks and close. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much, Innocent, for that perspective. And of course, thank you for reeling out how we can support people. The most exciting part for me is that everyone has 10% discount for just being part of this program if you have any project coming from your end with regards to strategy development. So thank you very much for that offer. So I would like everyone in the room, about 70-something of us in the room, to take advantage of that offer. And I would like to specially thank my panelists. Thank you very much, Muyiwa Olulaja, for making out time. I know you are a very busy person, but for making out time to be here. The same goes to Julia. Thank you very much for your time. I know it's not easy keeping you for 1 hour, 30 minutes. We have high-powered people in the room, and we don't take your time for granted. Really, really appreciate you and the value and the knowledge you have shared with us. Wale Adirun, we can't thank you enough. Thank you very much for, despite the fact that you were in transit and yet you are still able to make out and have this discussion with us. Yes, the contributions are completely invaluable, and we really appreciate that as well. So thank you very much for your time, and we wish you the best of luck in all your endeavors. And for our audience, we want to thank you specially for giving us this 1 hour, 30 minutes of your time. We don't take it for granted, but I want to believe that it is worth every single second, as it has been for each and every one of us. So thank you very much for joining this webinar. We hope to see you in the next episode. Thank you.